What does it mean to be a global African in the 21st century? Welcome to the Sankofa Pan-African series. Please turn on your notification button, subscribe, and support us through Patreon or by buying me coffee. Also, make time to check out sankofastorybooks.com for biographies, legends, nursery rhymes, and other resources for our young ones. What is global citizenship? We need to understand what global citizenship means before we understand what being a global African means. Ideally, global citizenship should mean that every person is an equal citizen of the world, and quite apart from our common humanity, it should also refer to the fact that whether or not we are aware of it, major decisions and actions, whether social, political, environmental, or otherwise, taken in one part of the planet affect people living in different parts of the world. So, why do we need to understand what global citizenship means? When we understand what global citizenship is supposed to mean, it should be easier for us to unwrap what it means to be global African citizens. As global Africans, we must be aware of and understand our place in the wider world. We should also be aware that it is not enough to take active roles in our communities, but that the very survival of our communities and the success of our activisms depend on actions and decisions being taken in other places. And it is our responsibility to look out for how those decisions affect us and future generations of Africans, wherever we may find ourselves. Global citizenship should be a gain of globalization. But is it? Now, the concept of globalization is, of course, not new, no matter how hard its proponents work to convince us that it is a new panacea to help the developing world. Globalization started with the European colonization of the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Think about it. When modern colonization began by mercenaries like Columbus and others who we have been led to believe were explorers, who were financed by their monarchs to go and look for resources to save their impoverished kingdoms in Europe. What were they doing? Replace human cargo with natural resources today, and the connection is quite clear. Countries in Europe simply took advantage of the abundance of resources found in other territories. And in ways similar to the kind of mayhem which those early European operators of globalization wrought in the territories which they ravaged, violence, starvation, and corruption are the order of the day now in the developing world, even as we remain conned into believing that globalization is a recent concept and that trade liberalization will help our development in spite of the accelerating decrease in the quality of life in the developing world. My point here is not to condemn the notion of globalization. I believe it is harmful because only a section of the world seems to have the kind of vision that allows them to exploit the resources of this earth at the expense of the rest of us. Globalization, which is supposed to be the process by which organizations develop international influence or operate on an international scale, is obviously driven by economics and the political interests of the economic north. While globalization is supposed to open up the flow of products, capital, people, and information, it has so far been a one-way traffic, in the sense that while it has more readily opened up avenues to more wealth and the advantages of global citizenship for people from the economic north, the same access has been increasingly denied people from the economic south. If anything, rather than help entrench the idea of global citizenship, globalization has been responsible for more uneven development because of the continued exploitation of resources from underdeveloped countries by developed countries. It has undermined the ability of citizens from the economic south to aspire to any form of equal global citizenship. Those of us from developing countries in Africa, the Caribbean, and other places are fully aware that we cannot just wake up and decide that we want to exercise our rights as global citizens by going on holiday or going to visit family in almost any country in the economic north without the hassles that attend getting entry to those places. I'm not even talking about economic migration here. Often, the fact that you can afford to pay your own way is no longer even relevant because of the level of gatekeeping that most countries in the economic north have been forced to put into place, because most of our countries in the economic south are hardly life-sustaining. A situation which has continued to be exacerbated by the widening of the economic gap caused by the global economic infrastructure that has been skewed to favor rich countries at the expense of the developing ones. So, is it therefore any wonder that most young people in the economic south, faced with an abysmal future, are bent on migrating to greener pastures? Nigerians have a colorful way of describing this wave of forced economic migration. Really, can we blame anyone for wanting to japa? Literally translated, to japa means to migrate by any means necessary. The ability to migrate, that is, move from one place to another for better economic opportunities, is as old as human beings have been on this earth. And in an ideal world, it should be one of the gains of globalization. Global citizens should have the opportunity to move around the globe, of which we're all supposed to be free and equal citizens. However, this very notion is utopian. That is why we find shiploads of human beings trying to make their way to Europe in search of better opportunities, being turned back on the high seas. In the same manner, large bands of people from Central and Southern America who are forced by poverty and become bent on making their ways into the US are met by all kinds of visible and invisible fences and threats to build even higher walls. A phenomenon which then led to Americans electing a not quite mentally balanced man as president of the so-called leading country of the free world. The point I'm trying to make is that the ideal of global citizenship grows increasingly elusive, which is why the idea of a global African citizenship should be one which appeals to us. There isn't just strength, but also wisdom in numbers. Now, before I try and encapsulate what I believe African global citizenship should entail, let me try and unpack what I conceive as the relationship between Pan-Africanism and a global African citizenship. At its inception, Pan-Africanism stemmed from movements that were dedicated to establishing independence for African nations and the cultivation of unity among Black people throughout the world. Behind its evolution was the idea that people of African descent have common interests and should be unified. Historically, Pan-Africanism has often taken the shape of political and cultural movements for independence of countries. Now, I like to situate global African citizenship as a natural offshoot of Pan-Africanism, in the sense that now that our countries are independent, at least on paper, global African citizenship should propel us as citizens of whatever country or countries we find ourselves on this earth, committed to advancing the notion of equality within and beyond our national borders. I say countries because some of us are citizens of more than one country. Global African citizenship should make us continue to engage our local challenges while situating them within global contexts. In other words, global African citizenship should help us connect the dots better as political, climate, youth, feminist, race, whatever kind of activism we are engaging in. Global African citizenship should keep us always cognizant of the bigger picture by linking our local situations with global connections. Why do some of us who are in diaspora expend so much energy trying to combat racism within our national borders, but cannot see it as an evil which has been allowed to cross borders unfettered, because we refuse to see how ingrained race is within the global economic architecture and power structures? Let me borrow and expand the clarion call raised by some of the earliest Black feminists to warn their middle-class white sisters. Until all people of African descent are free of oppression and seen to be equal to all other people, none of us will be free. Global African citizenship should strengthen us so that we do not readily continue to concede the evolution of ideas, solutions to our problems, and assumptions about us to the sometimes overwhelmingly well-meaning activists from the economic north. Activists who are well-meaning but always have the comfort of the fact that they are natives. And I choose to use the word natives here deliberately. They are natives of regions that have far-sighted leaders who are even already seen beyond this planet, that they are expending so much on exploring space for the benefits of their kind, countries and regions. Meanwhile, the majority of Africans and people of African descent in the Caribbean and other parts of the diaspora are grappling, handicapped by the very need to stay alive. To illustrate, I know from a friend, a most committed and respected activist in Nigeria, one who for decades has been at the forefront working to entrench democracy, good governance, accountability, respect for human rights, and so on in Nigeria. When I mentioned this topic to him, His response to me was, and I quote, "Thanks for sharing from someone who has been handicapped by his country to aim at the global." It's a very worrying situation when we get boggled down, when we are kept so boggled down by the exigencies of survival to actually make those necessary connections. Thanks for watching the Sankofa Pan-African series. Subscribe if you've not yet done so. Turn on your notification buttons. Share our videos with your friends. And support us through Patreon or by buying me coffee. Make time to also check out sankofastorybooks.com.